I mean, Russia is still fighting the war. Yesterday, Ukraine has just switched to the war of tomorrow in terms of technologies, in terms of approaches, in terms of effectiveness of what we do.
The Ukraine contact group of defense ministers is meeting now in Brussels, though for the first time in 3 years, the US defense secretary will not be attending. It looks rather like another sign of America losing interest in involvement, deep involvement in the war in Ukraine. In America, they're describing Pete Hegseth's absence as a scheduling problem. Now, Vladimir Putin, in the meantime, is saying he rejects a meeting with President Zelensky and President Trump. He says Ukraine's attacks, which destroyed dozens of Russian aircraft, bombers, were aimed at wrecking peace efforts, so there's nothing to discuss with those who he says rely on terror. And the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Rybakov, has been talking to the press just in the last hour.
Those outrageous criminal acts of Kiev regime definitely point to escalation, further escalation. There is no restraint on the part of Kiev, neither on the part of Kiev's sponsors, Britain included, and I would also say other European warriors, quote unquote, who do everything, simply everything, to derail any opportunity to get to the Pacific, peaceful settlement solution of this situation.
It's Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister there. Now, let us welcome to the programme Igor Novikov, the former advisor to President Zelensky of Ukraine on US issues. Welcome to the show.
Hello, John. Good afternoon.
It's good to have you back, Igor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
What do you expect from this meeting of ministers in Brussels today?
Well, first of all, before I forget, may I correct a small mistake that you made? You mentioned that Putin actually mentioned the attack on Russian strategic bombers.
Yeah.
He hasn't. He mentioned a terrorist attack that happened in southern Russia, southeastern Russia, against the rail infrastructure.
Right.
Now, we have the reason to believe that that was a false flag operation, and they were actually preparing a massive airstrike straight afterwards. And they were trying to use that attack to justify, disruption to the negotiations. Now, the Operation Spiderweb has basically messed everything up for them. So that's how it's played out. They were moving strategic bombers around over the course of the last 2-3 weeks. Then the rail attacks happened, and straight after that, they were right before the negotiations in Istanbul. They were planning to carry out an airstrike. Obviously, that hasn't happened for the reasons the entire world has seen now. And basically, what they're trying to do now is their plan B in communications. They're basically, Putin mentioned the rail attacks and said we're a terrorist state. Now, Ryabkov, the deputy foreign minister, is mentioning the strategic bomber attacks. But, Russia was so shell-shocked that he actually took part in Istanbul.
All right. It's very, very useful to hear that from you, Igor. Thank you. I want to come back to, where we go from here after what we saw, that successful raid on those Russian bombers in particular. But today in Brussels, they are meeting. It looks like potentially an important meeting, although the Americans are not there. What do you expect to come out of that?
Well, I don't want to preempt the results. I mean, it definitely won't be up to the level that we have seen before, especially a couple of years ago. But we expect Europe to commit further to helping Ukraine survive this, because I think by now it's pretty obvious to everyone that there will be no peace with Russia, and probably not even a ceasefire with Russia before at least October, when the warfare campaign ends.
Right. I mean, that's an interesting sort of timing thought. I want to develop that a bit for us. But I was talking to a former Russian prime minister just yesterday. He was talking about Russia being ready to continue waging war for anything up to 2 years. And how do your thoughts go on that subject?
Well, one of the reasons Ukraine is also kind of focusing on the asymmetric warfare and special operations is because obviously in the war of attrition against such a giant like Russia, there's no easy solution. So they continue this war for 3, 5, 10 years? Probably, most likely. I mean, in terms of cannon fodder, I mean, they have tens of millions of people, and history teaches us that they're never afraid to sacrifice those. Do they have weapon stockpiles? Yes. Do they have allies like North Korea and Iran? Yes. But it's up to us to make sure that the cost of continuing this war actually outweighs any benefits from it. So at the moment, a large chunk of their nuclear triad has suffered. Crimean Bridge got a small hint from us a couple of days ago, or yesterday, sorry, I'm jet lagged. So, and it's not over yet. I mean, we have cards up our sleeves, and we're not willing to sit back and just let the Russian meat grinder slowly devour Ukraine. That's not going to happen. The cost will be sky high for them.
Right. I mean, do you believe we are anywhere close at all to demonstrating to Russia that the pursuing and waging this war is not, it doesn't make sense. It's not in their interest. They can't win in the clearest sense.
Well, I do believe that they think they can win this war. Hence the strategy they've adopted for this campaign and this season. So they're basically giving us ultimatums in Istanbul and at the same time relying on the war of attrition to take even more of Ukraine. Now, is that likely to succeed? I wouldn't say yes, but I wouldn't say no either. But at the same time, Ukraine can do certain things to Russia that will make the Russian elite, the Russian public, and maybe, if his mental state allows for that, even Putin, to think hard about whether this war needs to continue.
That's really, again, that is interesting. And I know you are pretty plugged in to some of the thinking, in the inner circles of security policy in Ukraine. And you're not going to give me any kind of detailed answer at all to this. I know that. But we saw a military coup, a really, really spectacular strike against, what was it, a third of Russia's heavy bombing force wiped out by drones a few days ago. I mean, can we expect anything to compare with that by way of future operations?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, well,
that's a simple answer. Yes, you can. I mean, if you wanted more from me,
I understand the brevity. Believe me. I guess, and naturally, whatever that turns out to be, we'll have to wait to see it. But Ukraine's pulled off some extraordinary strokes, haven't you? I mean, the strikes on those Russian bombers, for one, the Kerch Bridge, despite Kerch Bridge being just so massively fortified. And maybe it's having some effect, and you hope to plant some seeds of doubt in Putin's mind. Now, what about America? What about America now? Pete Hegseth's absence in Brussels. There's only one way to see that, isn't it? It's another visible sign of America, I don't know, just generally disengaging.
Well, I don't really see any option for them to engage rather than to put a lot of pressure on Putin with the heaviest sanctions they can think of. The ones that were suggested in the Senate. Is Trump willing to do that? No. He's not the guy who likes confrontations with people he adores and considers his equals. I mean, we've seen that before. So I think their strategy at the moment is to kind of keep all the options open. And there's not really much they can do. I mean, if they want to commit to Ukraine kind of pushing back in the conventional warfare, what they need to provide Ukraine with is substantial, even by, the former administration standards. If they want to see what the asymmetrical warfare brings, they're willing to sit this one out to have that plausible deniability and engage in, Trump's dream discussions at some point. So they're predictable in what they're doing. But once again, I mean, Russia is still fighting the war. Yesterday, Ukraine has just switched to the war of tomorrow in terms of technologies, in terms of approaches, in terms of effectiveness of what we do. So remains to be seen what happens. But I would say you have just witnessed the first card that Zelensky had up his sleeve, and he has more.
All right. Now, just briefly, if we could, Igor, again, thank you for joining us. The Ukrainian ambition of joining NATO, and there are a number of members of NATO that would like to see that advance. We also know the obstacles to that. America, not interested. Other NATO members, not interested. Is that still a live aspiration, a live ambition in your mind?
Well, two things I can tell you. First of all, it's in our constitution. So, whatever my thoughts are, they're my private, personal thoughts on that. If you want me to share, so the answer is yes, Ukraine aspires to join NATO. Now, if you want my personal opinion, I would tell you that at the moment, I think the human race in the war theater has entered, a rapid evolution, probably even a revolutionary period in terms of technologies being used. And therefore, it remains to be seen who needs who more, whether it's Ukraine that needs NATO, or NATO needs Ukraine, or whether NATO even survives, what's going to happen over the next year or two. So remains to be seen, but you're not going to recognize this world in a year or two.
Yeah, again, really good to get your thoughts. And you make a valuable point. Ukraine and the war in Ukraine and the study of the way Ukraine has fought this war has been a tutorial to NATO and those who are looking ahead to the day, God forbid, when war does break out between NATO and Russia. For now, though, Igor Novikov, thank you so much.